Usually this internet darkest corner 3 years.
It is the early morning, and the working day of the steam locomotive and its crew is just beginning.
Wait, why is the subtitle?
It was the 31st of August, 2023.
I was confused for a second.
A typical day for 34-year-old Michael Zanera, as he had yet again spent his afternoon working hard on the railway. Michael was a welder who had been putting in long hours repairing train tracks in northern Italy, a job he seemed to thoroughly enjoy, as he'd often post various images and videos onto his TikTok page, showcasing this unique work that he was doing.
Repairing train tracks.
By this point, this was the type of content that you typically expect from Michael, with some other images and various memes sprinkled in here and there, cultivating into a rather inconspicuous page that, for the most part, flew completely under the radar. Or at least it did until that final day of August, when Michael would encounter one of the strangest moments of his entire life. The post he'd share was just a single image, showcasing what appeared to be one of the tracks he had been working on, with a strange glowing cross at its center. For more context, Michael would write, "It's the first time this has happened to me while I'm balancing the rail. The crucifix came out. God definitely wants to tell me something, even though I've been calling him every day lately, because it's not a good time for me."
It's a calling from God.
It was quite the strange coincidence, especially considering that Michael himself was known to be very religious and a devout believer in God, and he had been calling out to God for months looking for some sort of sign to help him out of this dark patch that he had found himself in. And in his mind, this inexplicable red cross was it. It had to mean something, but he just couldn't figure out what. And so we posted the image to TikTok to share it with the world before continuing on with his work, likely having the vision of this cross looming in the back of his mind all day, trying to figure out what exactly this could be foreshadowing. And just 24 hours later, he would get his answer.
Bad happened.
An investigation is underway after 5 railway workers were killed by a speeding train in northern Italy. They were working on replacing parts of the track at the Brandizzo station near Turin when the locomotive slammed into them.
How did that happen?
On the 1st of September 2023, just one day following Michael's post, he and 6 others had been continuing their maintenance on the tracks, when, out of nowhere, a train would come hurtling towards them, at a speed far too great to properly react to, as according to reports, the men had been working late at night welding train tracks. As they were busy going about their jobs, an oncoming train headed straight towards them at 100 miles per hour, killing most of the team of workers and throwing their bodies hundreds of meters in the air. Within that group, 5 of the 7 men would tragically perish, with the victims being named as Kevin Legana, Giuseppe Sorvillo, Giuseppe Lombardo, Giuseppe Aversa, and Michael Zanera, who was pronounced dead at the scene, passing away on the very tracks that just one day prior had yielded what he and many others believed to be a sign from God. The cause of this tragedy is still currently under investigation, with early reports hinting at it being nothing more than a tragic accident. And whether this glowing red cross was some sort of divine intervention, or just simply an eerie coincidence, Michael's final post remains haunting nonetheless. It has now found a permanent home
It's kind of weird.
In the internet's
Coincidence.
darkest corners.
They know that the only right track is away from the tracks altogether.
One of the most startling facts about witches is that there are more of them today than ever before.
To her husband, she must be a companion, a sweetheart, a wife, and a mother. She must know how to make her home comfortable and inviting.
Website.
Our next case takes us to Japan, where 18 years ago, one of the strangest websites that I've ever come across would be launched for the world to see. Now, to properly understand its context, it's important to note that, in large part, Japan is a country that culturally looks down on the practice of divorce. So much so that in most cases a partner can't separate on their sole discretion, and it must instead be approved
Yeah, that is kind of bad.
by both parties, making it a difficult thing to achieve in general, and those that actually are able to go through with it are often judged in an
Yeah, they just don't normalize divorce.
extremely negative light, especially by their family members. For these reasons, couples will often wind up being stuck together regardless of their feelings towards one another. And it's this very sense of being trapped with someone that you don't actually love that can lead to emotions turning sour very quickly, with many eventually reaching the point of pure hatred for their spouse. Hatred that has led to the rise of one of Japan's darkest websites, danashin.com, or in English, husbanddie.com. The forum takes inspiration from the manga Death Note, a series in which characters write a name in a book which ultimately leads to their demise. It's a manifestation of sorts, and on danashin.com, users are given an outlet to manifest death upon their husbands. But this goes far past just typing
And the husband find out this.
their name out and hoping that they eventually perish. Instead, each post contains some sort of description as to why their husband is so hated, and how they wish that they would just die already. What do I have to do to get you to die? Hurry up already. I pray for it every single
Yeah, actually committing. Okay.
day. You're the most selfish person I've ever met. Even the kids hate you, so there is no need for you here. My life started its downfall because I met you.
Why have the children read
You
this
should have
type
never
of
become a
stuff?
husband or a father. I'm the one who is the biggest fool in all of this for not being able to see that until it was too late. Just disappear from this universe. Just disappear. I keep telling myself that I will be patient until my child becomes of high school age, but every day is nothing but pain. Don't you understand that when you say you won't show your smartphone, you're admitting it? Reserve insurance, full expectation, die before that, and make amends. Posts like these are littered across the site, with thousands of women venting their allegations of infidelity, neglect, and even abuse at the hands of their own husbands. Allegations that society would likely frown upon if they were said out loud, and allegations that would likely lead to divorce, which would be considered far too taboo. And so, with nowhere to go to with these issues, this site has become a space for women to share their dark feelings with others going through these similar issues. Though this goes far past just venting, as users will go as far as to outwardly celebrate the deaths of their husband when it finally does happen. My husband died. Finally,
Okay,
he died.
then.
Thank you for granting the god of death my wish. I will spend a lot of time laughing from now on. To which a user responds, congratulations, I envy you. I want to sleep too. I hope that your future
It's just getting weird now.
will be wonderful. God of death, I also want to be freed from my damn husband.
Can just stay silent. I mean,
Please take ours with you as well. This concept of the god of death is one that is mentioned countless times across this forum, making it apparent that users genuinely believe that their posts are manifestations, and essentially prayers to this god of death, in the hopes that they will then kill off their troubled husbands. And the Danashin site leans into this too, taking credit for the numerous deaths with a monthly counter that's proudly displayed on the site's homepage. It's this very god of death that so many place their trust into in order to end the lives of their spouse, praying for things like car accidents, heart attacks, and a variety of other terrible health conditions. But while many eagerly wait for their manifestations to come to light, others aren't so patient. I want
there's
to
no
somehow
doors.
find a way to kill my husband without getting caught. I'll pretend to be sad when he dies, so please, really die? I hate him from the bottom of my heart, and if I make him shut up, I would win. I hate myself for why I married such a person. This post in particular has become one of the more notorious entries on the site, given its users' outward admission of their murderous desire. Though truthfully, it's one of thousands, as many others even take this a step further. Like one post that was so disturbing that YouTube made me remove it from this video, as it quite literally gave step-by-step instructions on how to poison your husband without him noticing, mentioning how they slipped up to 1,200 milligrams of this certain drug into their husband's drinks every single day, a drug that would slowly cause the liver to fail, but would likely never really be noticed by regular hospital staff, making it essentially a foolproof way for them to kill their husbands. And this is one of many posts like this, outlining
That is actually scary.
how to murder your husband and get away with it, with many even reporting their progress as it happens, due to the fact that poisoning someone in this manner takes months and even years to successfully complete. Everything about DonnaSheen.com is terrible, as the posts themselves are twisted enough, but you also have to factor how bad these women's lives are at home, many of whom are quite clearly stuck in abusive relationships. And beneath all the darkness of this site is another layer that's honestly just very sad, as there are many users who call to the god of death to take themselves, accepting that there is no escaping their situations and not wanting to deal with it anymore, manifesting
What is
accidents and
this
health issues onto
picture?
themselves as to not shame their family by intentionally ending their own lives. Despite the depressing and concerning nature of this entire website, DonnaSheen.com still remains relatively active all these years later, and stands as one of the darkest rabbit holes that I've gone down all year.
Its engines are warming up, and inside the cab sits Mr. Schroeder, the engineer who has driven locomotives for many years.
The safety of all the passengers depends on his skill and watchfulness.
Metro.
What's the address of the emergency?
Yes, I'm on the Metrolink train. We just left Northridge. We had a collision with something. We have a whole bunch of people going out bleeding and on the floor.
Is that train?
It's the Metrolink train.
This call was placed to 911 on
Some
the afternoon of
grass.
September 12, 2008, by a patron trapped inside a derailed train. Inside the cart, there was no way to fully understand the traumatic event that they had just survived, as around them stood nothing but mangled debris that once comprised two large trains. Trains that had violently collided at a combined speed of 83 miles per hour, head-on. It was gruesome, as trapped within that twisted metal were hundreds of passengers who had taken the commuter train in California's San Fernando Valley. And as the smoke would eventually clear on the tragedy, the question was quickly posed: how could this have happened? A question that wouldn't take long to answer. According to the NTSB, the Metrolink passenger train responsible for carrying over 200 commuters had been given a red signal alerting them to merge into an oncoming track in order to avoid an oncoming Union Pacific freight train, which at the time only had crew members aboard. Based on their positioning, the Union Pacific freight train had the right of way, though despite this and being given the clear signal, Metrolink's engineer Robert M. Sanchez failed to adhere. In fact, despite the impending collision seemingly being imminent, the brakes were never so much as tapped, a startling phenomenon that is only really understood when sifting through the man's phone records.
Meanwhile,
What?
authorities are
Didn't
now
break?
confirming the engineer had been text messaging the day of the accident.
In the minutes leading to the collision, Robert Sanchez had sent out numerous texts, including some to friends of his who were fellow train enthusiasts. And these messages seemingly distracted him to the point of not just missing the signal, but failing to notice the massive hurtling train coming directly towards him. In the end,
Distracted by messages. What?
Robert would be killed instantly in the wreck, along with 24 others. All the while, 135 people were left with serious injuries. But despite how notorious this collision has since become, thanks in large part due to Robert's behavior leading to it, it has since gained additional notoriety on the internet, thanks to a key detail centered around another cell phone. Following news of the collision being broadcast all across the area, Andrea Katz, the fiancée of 49-year-old Charles Peck, immediately began to panic, as she knew Charles was on board the train at the time of this collision. Her nerves were initially quelled, however, as she would realize that on her phone were multiple missed calls from Charles. Realizing this, she quickly called him back, though there was no answer, which was made a bit more unusual as, only minutes later, Charles would call her back once more. Upon answering the phone, nothing could be heard but the low sound of static, before they would be disconnected. This very same thing would happen once more,
Is it last moment or something?
and then again and again, all the while occurring at various intervals, as Charles seemed to be desperately calling, yet saying nothing. And when Andrea would try and call back herself, she would be sent straight to voicemail. And things became even more alarming from here, as numerous other family members began to receive these very same mysterious calls, to which not a word was ever spoken. This led to the whole family believing that Charles must be trapped somewhere in the wreckage, and was likely unable to speak due to his injuries, but was somehow managing to send these calls
Still alive?
as a way of letting them know that he was in fact alive and just needed saving. Because of this, his family members would cheer him on and give him words of encouragement every single time he called, assuring him that rescue was on the way. And sure enough, authorities would use these calls to pinpoint Charles' exact location, with the coordinates being right at the very center of the debris. And using this, rescuers would clear the way until finally, after 12 long hours, Charles Peck would be found. Which leads us to the strangest part of this story.
Is he alive or...
Charles was dead.
Okay.
And not freshly dead either, as it was quite obvious that he had died directly on impact, meaning that there was no physical way that he could have possibly made these calls, as he quite literally was not alive for any of them. And yet, that day, his son, his brother, his stepmother, his sister, and his fiancée all received numerous calls from him, 35 in total, and all spread out over the course of numerous hours. To this day, this bizarre phenomenon has never fully been explained, with some theorizing that it must have been some sort of phone glitch, or maybe even another passenger who had found his phone and was placing calls to all of his recent numbers, though an official conclusion has never actually been given. And even stranger, Charles Peck's phone was never found.
That is mysterious.
Boy, I've never been so glad to get rid of somebody in my whole life.
September 19th, a man is crushed and tortured to death under the suspicion of practicing witchcraft. September 22nd, 8 individuals are hanged on the same charges. And October 17th, 4 elderly women were hanged upon the belief that they too were witches. These stories will likely ring a bell with many watching today, especially those who are living in the United States, as back in the 1600s, in the small town of Salem, Massachusetts, a bizarre mass hysteria had unfolded, leading to the deaths of 25 people, all of whom had been incorrectly labeled as witches. The Salem witch trials are one of the darkest and most notorious tales ever told, given just how unusual the whole event was, as it just seems so hard to imagine a situation like this actually occurring. And most would understandably believe that something of this nature could never happen again, failing to realize that it actually already has. In fact, of the opening 3 executions, only 2 happened during the Salem witch trials, with the latter happening just 2 years ago.
2021
This was first reported to the Western world back in 1993, when the LA Times would feature an article titled, "Kenyan Villagers' Suspicions, Fear Spark Deadly Witch Hunt. Evil Lurks Beneath the Tranquil Facade of 2 Highland Districts, where vigilantes have burned to death 44 men and women accused of practicing harmful witchcraft." The article goes on to explain how, since the previous summer, 44 men and women accused of practicing witchcraft had been burned to death in Kissy, as well as other nearby towns, a number that's nearly double the entirety of the Salem witch trials. In most cases, village mobs had formed, some several hundred strong, locking the suspected witches in their home and setting fire to the structures, as they were trapped inside. For more context, witchcraft is known to have deep roots in African culture, and despite many not having an issue with the practice in general, in the county of Kissy, a deep fear had grown over black magic in particular.
How do we have no issue on this, man?
With the villagers becoming paranoid that members of the community had been using said black magic to negatively influence the area. Despite the shocking claims made within the article, not much would be spoken of these witch trials following its release to the public, and remained relatively unknown until the rise of the internet.
Witches in Kenya resulted in 11 people being burned to death. 8 women and 3 men were attacked by an angry mob and set on fire.
They burnt down over 60 houses like this and brutally murdered 15 people. Most of them were elderly women.
The charred corpses of 11 elderly Kenyan villagers accused of practicing witchcraft.
In this incident 3 months ago, villagers watched as a group of youths torture 5 suspected witches.
Nowadays, incidents from the Kissy area involving witches being killed are heavily documented by villagers with cell phones, capturing images and videos of beatings, public shamings, and eventually the killings of these alleged witches, providing some of the most chilling imagery I've ever seen on the internet, and exposing the true horrors of this practice all across the world. And what's scariest of all is that it's not just one or two people doing the killing in secret, it's often the entire village. As anyone brave enough to step forward in support of them would be labeled as a witch sympathizer and potentially face the same punishment. And what makes this all even more disturbing is that in the vast majority of examples, the accused witches that are being tortured, set on fire, and beaten are usually elderly, and are far too frail to do anything but accept their fate. Which brings us to the biggest question in all of this. Why? Well, despite the practice of executing witches being ingrained in this area's history, it's supposedly only really within the past 40 years or so that things have progressed into the barbaric attacks that they've become today, prompting some to believe that the ingrained fear of black magic has led to some sort of mass hysteria among the villagers, causing them to react in such a crazed manner, which has remained persistent for years on end now. Though there is one other element to consider. In the Kissy region, land is one of the most valuable things you can own, and coincidentally, when these supposed witches are killed, it just so happens to free up their land for the taking, which makes it all the more interesting when you consider that most of these victims just so happen to be elderly landowners. And it goes even deeper than that.
And they want more land, so this
Not
is
only are these elderly landowners killed, but due to their designation as witches, the family members they leave behind are usually exiled or even killed due to their relation to the witch, meaning that the land can't be passed down to their next of kin as there would be no family left in the area, making that land essentially open for the taking, thus allowing the accuser or accusers to take ownership. The incentive is certainly there for people to take advantage of this widespread fear of witches in order to essentially get free land with no real punishment. And I honestly think this greed surrounding land, at the very least, plays a role in this whole situation. Though truthfully, I wouldn't be surprised if this was some sort of combination of culture, mass hysteria, and land all rolled into one, leading to the worst of humanity being brought out. And though the local government has taken steps to help end this violence, these three factors may prove too much to ever see the practice fully end. And as long as it's happening, the internet will be there to capture it all.
Okay, what's next? Last ride. It's very interesting.
Taylor Scrum began her TikTok account back in October of 2020. Being just 20 at the time, Taylor had fallen in love with all things motorcycles, dedicating her life and the entirety of her TikTok page to this hobby of hers. Through the following years, Taylor would post various memes and inspirational videos to her page, helping her amass a decent following along the way, with fellow riders appreciating the more niche aspects of her content and her attempts to break the stigma surrounding female motorcyclists. Though not all of her postings were without controversy. On various instances, Taylor would film videos of herself driving recklessly, soaring well past the speed limit and performing various dangerous tricks while on the road, with the stunts growing concerning enough to the point that TikTok began adding disclaimers to numerous of her videos, stating participating in this activity could result in you or others getting hurt. Many of the things that Taylor had been showcasing on her page
actually dangerous.
were downright reckless, and she seemed to acknowledge this all the while, joking about it across various videos on her page.
Oscar, yes, stress sweat is getting all over me.
Leading some to believe that Taylor had a death wish, or she seemingly just couldn't believe that a rider of her caliber could ever get into an accident, hinting at this on numerous occasions and showing no signs of changing her behavior. And she continued doing so all the way up until the 23rd of May, when her most notorious video yet would be released.
It's all for a cloud. Is she good?
Flagler County fatal crash, 195 northbound at MM296, multiple motorcycles traveling together. Approximately 3 motorcyclists went down, 2 motorcyclists pronounced deceased on scene. Roadway is currently blocked at this time. Please seek alternative route. While Taylor was riding with a group of 4 other motorcyclists, the group would inexplicably begin to swerve and crash into each other, hurling each and every rider into the air and down onto the pavement below, with it all happening so randomly and so quickly that a large SUV heading straight for them was unable to stop in time, running over each of the riders. 22-year-old Taylor Scrome was pronounced dead on the scene, along with one other 29-year-old man, with this crash occurring just a single day after this final TikTok post. Taylor's story is tragically ironic, though here on the internet you can find numerous other similar examples of final postings that led to unforeseen tragedy, with one of the most haunting coming from all the way back in 2008. Alright guys, I'm new here and I have a question. As I'm driving in M mode, with the car set to P500 Sport and everything set to max, as I shift with the pedal shifters, it sounds like the transmission is banging into gear, like there is a thud that comes from the trunk when I upshift. Could this be due to the way that I'm shifting, or is this normal? And if so, is there any trick to working the shift? Let me say I am a beginner when it comes to high performance cars, as I'm only 18, so take it easy on me. This post was made by the user American M5 on the website m5board.com, a forum dedicated to drivers who owned BMW M5s, a pricey sports car revered by many thanks to its high speed. In the thread, some users would leave genuine advice for the young driver, but many others responded with disdain, doubting that he actually owned this expensive car at such a young age, along with some who blamed his age on these issues that he was having with his vehicle. Maybe your 2 years driving experience in your whole life is the problem. This is the internet after all, and so for whatever reason, it seemed that many in the group took great offense to his youthfulness. But through it all, there were a select few who expressed concern for the young driver, as based on his posting, it was apparent that he had been driving the car very fast and potentially recklessly, with one user writing, "I would much prefer an 18-year-old with brains to have an M5 than spend his money on some other piece of junk that could kill him and his mates in an accident. My only bit of advice, matey, if you crash in a big way, expect to be on the news. Enjoy and resist the temptation to drag others at the light."
What is this guy while
There
playing?
was another user who commented, "Please be careful driving balls out. 18-year-olds and M5s don't mix well." Following this, American M5 would leave a comment thanking the entire forum for their input, even those who reacted negatively to his post. "Thanks guys, don't get me wrong, I never said I didn't respect your wisdom. Thanks for the welcome, and I am looking forward to getting to know you guys better, Josh. And I plan to have all the pics up tomorrow." With this last line referencing taking photos as proof that he did in fact own the car that he claimed to. These photos, however, never came. As a matter of fact, following this comment on January 25th, 2008, American M5 went radio silent, which is when things started to take a concerning turn. The very next day, on January 26th, news would break of a high-speed accident having taken place at 3:54 in the morning near Jacksonville, Florida, involving a car filled with 5 occupants, all between the ages of 18 to 20. According to the report, the group had driven their car onto a private airstrip in the area and had been driving at dangerously high speeds before the driver lost control and ended up soaring off the edge of an 85-foot-high embankment, leading to the instant death of all 5 inside the vehicle, with the driver being identified in the report as Joshua Amarato, an 18-year-old who happened to be driving a BMW M5.
The same guy.
The news immediately made its way to the thread, where one user commented, "Hey, American M5 lives in Florida, is 18, drives a gray M5, and signed one of his posts above, Josh. OMG, I hope this is not him." And another saying, "American M5, you better respond to M5 board ASAP, we all worry now." Though Josh would never post to this thread again. And from that day on, no activity would ever come from the American M5 account, making it all too likely that he was the one behind the wheel of that terrible accident.
That's ending. It's a bit entertaining.